my name is Catherine Harrison. I'd like to welcome you to the third episode of The Power of Five. In this series of videos, you'll hear from 5 behavior change specialists on topics related to leadership. And the intention here is to hopefully bring you something new to ponder and to provoke some thought about how you might take some very real and actionable steps in your own work life and in your own leadership practice. The question for our panel today is near and dear to my heart. We've been using the mantra environmentally of reduce, reuse, and recycle for 40 years now. And my question to the group is, how does this slogan apply to leadership? How can you manage resources, time, money, effort, content, whatever, more effectively and efficiently? And I'd like to throw it over to Mandy to kick us off.
Thanks, Catherine. It's a challenging question, actually. So I dug deep around it and I thought reduce. So the immediate one that came to mind was obviously reducing our reliance on face-to-face interaction and connection. And that has surprised and yet delighted me. So I was in great fear because I'm really a face-to-face hugger and feed off energy. So that was really amazing. The reuse was an interesting one. Again, I'm a flip chart kind of gal when I'm in a room with people. So now all of a sudden, I find I've had to go back and reuse PowerPoints, which I've never done. I haven't done for years. But then I've looked at it and I thought, but that means I'm using less paper, which is a good thing from a recycle perspective. And so I feel like a recycle perspective, I've been a lot better at that. I've been using a lot less paper, but I've also been doing a lot less travel, a lot less commuting. Although that makes me sad, it's also meant my carbon footprint has been a lot less. So it's really challenged the way I'm turning up, both professionally as well as personally. So that's what I've found.
Cool.
Yeah.
Who'd like to go next?
For me, I focused in on the reduce, and I think even during this whole change to virtual, at times I find myself getting distracted, and the things I should be working on, I'm not always moving the needle very far. And so I was reminded through this discussion about Parkinson's law. And so Parkinson's law is that the work expands the amount of time you give yourself to do it. And so I realized, partway through this process that to move things forward, I needed to truthfully give myself less time instead of more time, because I can always push something off to another day. So I use a lot of the Pomodoro techniques, 20 to 25 minutes focus time to try to get things moved forward. And I just kind of remind myself, it's like the Friday before you're going to go on vacation. You tell yourself, I got to get all these things done before I go on vacation, and then I can go. It's unbelievable how efficient and productive you can be when you have a deadline that you have to hit. And especially when you pack it in, a whole bunch of things into a small amount of time. And so I keep going back to that. And Parkinson's law, this whole thought process of, if I was going to give myself a day to get it done, what would happen if I only gave myself 45 minutes? And how far would I get? And could I almost be done? And then it's a shortcut after that.
Yeah. What's interesting about that, and I think in this time of being thrust into remote work and we're all at home, there might even be a mindset that we feel like we have all this time because here we are. Like we woke up, we're still in our pajamas, like we never really left the... and so it can seem like we have all this time, and perhaps that weighs in. And so it makes me think of setting crystal clear boundaries and some structure, and then maybe even using those extra found minutes to have that well-being balance, or that personal balance, or the creative balance, the innovative balance that would otherwise have been wasted during commuting or other prehistoric behaviors that we used to do all the time.
Yeah. The first thing that came to mind when I was thinking about reduce, and I couldn't get it out of my head, reduce the noise. Like there's so much noise, right? And whether it's from, media and sources that are coming up telling, do this, don't do that, and so on. It's like, focus has got to be in there at some point, right? Where we've got to reduce the noise, and which sort of goes hand in hand, I guess, with, if we're talking about reuse, it's like reuse what works, right? Like don't change for the sake of change. And there's a real temptation right now that we need to reinvent the wheel on so many things. And there's a lot of stuff that still works. So, figure out what that is and hold on to it, and get rid of the stuff that, you don't need, but you don't need to get rid of all of it, right? Just reduce the noise and stay focused.
Yeah.
I love this theme. And so the two things immediately that came to mind. So around reuse, to me, it was like return to beginner's mind. This is a new environment. This is a new opportunity. This is a new work landscape. Let's have a blank canvas and return to that, maybe that founder's mindset. If this was day one on your job, what would you do? And we can look at some of the ideas and how we came up, the process of how we came up with these great ideas, and use that, reuse those again, but really return to the beginner's mind and not fall into, well, this is the way that we've done it. And then the reduce one, and just to tie on to what Todd was saying is, I know in the old days, like the beginning of March, the old days, I had heard so many people, including me, say, I wish I just had some time to focus without everybody coming and bugging me. Wish granted. You have lots of time to focus. So now you can really do that deep work and put that in, and not just fill your calendar for the sake of filling your calendar, but do that deep work because you don't have the noise that Todd was talking about.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny, Shawn, you say that about reducing the noise and we have more time. And then, I'm hearing people say, I have even less time. And I think it's because everyone wants you on a Zoom call. Everyone wants you on a phone call. And I love the idea that, put boundaries up. You got to put some boundaries up around these things just to keep the noise down, because there's a lot of it and you can get sucked into it really easily.
Yeah.
Power saying no, right? I had a client call earlier today, and same thing. They said the leaders and everybody, now there's no end of the day at 5 o'clock. And I said, well, we had an honest conversation. That's on us. That's because we're saying yes to everything. To go back, Mandy had talked about, I think Mandy talked about before, Covey's 4 quadrants. It's not in quadrant 2, then we need to ask if we should do it or not.
Yeah, 2 things that bubble up for me. You mentioned deep work, and I'm a huge Cal Newport fan. I don't know if those are here, you guys have read his book, Deep Work. And then the most recent one was called Digital Minimalism. And I think that they're both really relevant right now, because in order to do deep work, you need to minimize the digital onslaught that Todd mentioned, and that you said, like, hey, I wish for some time so I could just focus. But right now, if we sit in front of our computer and we're tethered to our phone, we're just getting pings and pongs, and there's so much really interesting and thoughtfully communicated content right now. It's almost like this endless buffet that, I don't know about you, but I feel almost guilty if I'm not up to speed on everything that's happening in the world. And boy, there's a lot happening in the world right now. And so just, as you guys just sort of concluded, that we have to self-advocate for some boundaries where we can actually turn things off, take some time to do the deep work, and then reduce or minimize that noise. And also, like, I love that notion of beginner's mind too, Shawn, because when I think about reusing and repurposing, a lot of the content that we talk about all the time through a different context, hello, COVID-19, becomes a very different conversation, right? I found a sales manual of my dad's, a binder from the 70s when he was in sales training 101 from 1977 or something like that. I can tell you there is nothing new in that binder, right? So how can we actually even notice that and go, we've got this time, how do we take the same content, but put it through a different lens and have different conversations and use some of this time to reimagine, right? We talked another time, but how do we reimagine moving forward? So I think it's really such a cool conversation.
Yeah, I love that word, reimagine. And that was the other reword, you know, so we've got reuse, recycle, and I particularly think from a leadership perspective, the reimagining. So we might take something old, but we'll reimagine how we're going to put it into the future. Because the one word, reword, that I don't want and I don't like from a leadership perspective is return. And I think if you listen, I'm very conscious of people's language. So if I hear leaders talking about returning to work versus reimagining what work is going to be like, straight away I go, oh, this is interesting. You haven't enjoyed being exposed as a leader. And therefore what you're trying to do is go back to what you did, where you had control and power and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's another really important, and you're not going to be able to do that thinking in the reimagining if you don't set boundaries and allow yourself the time and the space and reduce the noise in order to do that thinking and allow your people to do that thinking.
Joel, what's bubbling around up there?
Yeah, so it's interesting as you were talking about that, and we use this whole recycling theme, but what struck me is this maybe a different take on this, was just kind of upcycling, right? So it's the taking something that used to work or have a specific purpose and start using it in a different way, or re-energizing it in some ways. And Shawn's piece on curiosity and just being curious, right, is a big part of where I've at least found myself going during all the distractions, right, is to be able to dig a little bit deep on something, read a different point of view, and just try to understand things better than I did before. I think in the busyness of things, we tend to stick with our own point of view and perspective and what we've always thought. And if anything, I think COVID has taught us a number of lessons, one of which is, we're a lot more adaptable than we think we are. And the other piece is, if we're willing to be curious and ask questions and go deep with people and do some of this deep work, we can come out the other side so much better than we were before. And that's that kind of that upcycling. We start with the good and then make it even better.
Yeah.
And I think too, Joel, it's and first let me go back to Catherine. Deep work I love, and essentialism. Those are my two. If Desert Island books are essentialism and deep work. And I try to live my life through that frame. Like, I'd really like to go to this 11 o'clock meeting, but this one's gonna make me money. So the thing that comes to mind that brought all of us together is habit change and behavioral change. So we're all behavioral change experts. In my leadership group, we're on day 5 of, I always give them games and challenges, and I called it the airplane mode game. So I asked them to go on, put their phone, their addiction box on airplane mode for 1 hour a day for a week. We have 4 people still on day 5 that would do it, because there's an email. Oh, it's spam. Like, wow. So to be intentional and to create a habit, small steps at a time, means actually doing less. The biggest opportunities in life are when we do less, but more of the right stuff. And so I love this whole, I forget what book I read it in, airplane mode can be a way of life. It's not just for airplanes.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think, one of the important things that we need to do, especially now, is carve out time for ourselves. And, life has changed a bit, right? You're at home, you've got kids, you've got, family members you're taking care of. Like, it's work-life blending is happening, work-life integration. And so if we don't put some of the boundaries around our time, if we don't, put some of the social contracting in that says, okay, this is what, is expected, but I don't expect people to do this. We don't build those kinds of constructs. We can get sucked into the noise, and we can get sucked into, the devices that are calling us all the time, because we've gotten to a point now, it feels like that, whenever we have a fleeting thought, we type it out in an email and we send it out. Just like, oh, I think we should probably do this. Boom, it's out there. And it's like, next thing you know, you've got 800 emails in your inbox. And how do you start putting some boundaries around all of this to, you know, keep your sanity and keep your ability to be productive at all?
Yeah, the other thing too is whenever we have a thought now, because we're most often just at home, we can Google something and go down the rabbit trail of a million amazing or not amazing things, but nonetheless, you can spend a lot of time there. And what comes to mind is the work that you do around courage, Todd, and courageous conversations and the whole Dare to Lead thing. And I think that it's interesting in this time when we talk about organizations and leaders, and when I think also about, you know, reduce, reuse, recycle, I would love for leaders to consider, what did we do in the last year or two that, given this new situation, we should just like redo it? And like, have we really like mastered, you know, active listening? Have we mastered courageous conversations? Have we mastered, you know, whatever it is that we were trying to do from a leadership development perspective? And how can we bring that into the conversation now through this new lens? I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that's absolutely critical, and I think it ties in with what you were saying before, Catherine, around, you know, looking at your dad's books. I think we need to recycle some really solid leadership theories and stop looking for new stuff. And, you know, there's a client that I'm working with at the moment that I'm only working with some of the teams at the moment. I did a 5-year leadership program with them about 3 years ago. They've now gone to a new company, only because I know, because I'm having to use some of the work in this next workshop. So I've gone to a new company with a new approach to leadership. And I'm looking at it and I'm going, why do you need to go to something new? We covered all of that stuff in the other program. You didn't do it. Now you go, oh, we're going to a bright new shiny place, you know. And I think this recycle is really important. Let's go down to the solid foundations and stick with it and master it and create habits. And I think what became really obvious to me is that I'm working with a CEO at the moment. He's already done my Courageous Leadership program about 3 years ago. He's now in a new organization. I assumed that he would get his team to do the program, but not himself. And he said, no, I'm doing it again. He said, because I'm going to learn more. I'm going to be with different people and I'm bringing a different lens and I want to keep using the same language. We don't have many people that were prepared to do that.
Yeah. So any final thoughts or weigh-ins on our little how to repaint the thing we found at the bottom of the driveway during our new remote work life?
I just want to tie on to what Mandy said, that you know, I read the Covey 7 Habits book like almost 30 years ago. It was my first job at a university. So there you go. I'm dating myself. But those principles are still the same. The foundations are the foundations. And I think we try to layer things on top and, hey, why don't we learn this? No, why don't we like get a foundation and make it a habit? Why don't we do that first? And the answers are there. We just have to return back to the basics. And
do some deep work there.
Yes.
And do
essential
some deep work. Yeah, because it can feel good just, you know, relearning the stuff, right? Sitting there and listening to the content again, it feels like you're doing something. But years later, you're listening to the content again. It just happened to be written a different way. So get in there, get the work done.
And I think one of the things we've talked about before, you know, the positive and negatives of COVID, but in many ways it's exposed some of the things that we thought we knew, we thought we were doing, and we're realizing now we're not. And so being able to dig back in and say, okay, if I'm really going to practice this now, what does it look like? And if I want to get better at this, how much more work do I need to put into it? And so in some ways, COVID has kind of forced us to take a look in the mirror and say, you know, I thought I was really good at building trust, and now I'm not so sure. Or I thought I was great at having courageous conversations, and I'm really realizing I've been putting one off for the last 2 weeks. And so it's time for me to step into it.
Yeah. So anyone want to just wrap us up with what's in listening to this discussion? What would be one really crystal clear opportunity that a listener might be able to just reflect on and implement in their own space? Anyone want to take a stab at what's one thing that they could consider?
One thing I would put forward, and in fact, we spoke about this in episode 2, be intentional. Are you being intentional about what you're reducing, reusing, recycling? Are you being intentional about, those lessons that you learned? Are you being intentional about the deep work? Like, what's your intention? And don't let it just wash over you and be happenstance. Like, be intentional.
Yeah, I would also say, following on what Joel said, go back to the basics. And we all know, in any time when you talk about leadership, go back to the basics, and the basic is trust. Go and revisit that. What's our level of trust? What are we doing to extend that and deepen it?
I'll go back to something I said earlier. I think the more distractions we feel like are swirling around us, the more we just need to focus in on smaller bursts. So start breaking your work down into 20 minutes, or give yourself that, if I get this project done, I'm going to reward myself by reading a couple articles on LinkedIn or elsewhere. But the more we can limit the distractions and move the needle on the work that really needs to get done, again, we're going to find ourselves in a much different place.
And I would say in 2 words, it's what's your vision and show me your schedule. Schedule doesn't lie, right? Schedule doesn't lie. So
new t-shirts, Shawn, new t-shirts.
Yeah.
Schedules never lie.
Thank you so much, guys, for sharing your thoughts on this topic. I appreciate it. It seemed a little bit out there, but I really loved how you brought it to life, and we're quite explicit in connecting it to leadership opportunities and our new ways of working. And thanks to everyone who tuned in today. Thank you for investing your very precious time with us. And if you found this useful, keep an eye out for future episodes. We're going to keep talking about what we love talking about and exploring what it takes to be an effective leader. Take care.